I'm 93 years old. I have buried 2 husbands, raised 4 children, and watched more people pass through my life than I could ever count. In those 93 years, I have seen at least 40 good, kind, generous people, people who worked hard and loved deeply and never said no to anyone, give away everything they had, their money, their time, their sleep, their peace, and they died tired, confused, and wondering why the people they gave everything to weren't there at the end. I'm going to tell you what happened to them. And I'm going to tell you the 2 things, just 2, that when someone asks you for them means they are using you, not loving you, using you. And here is the thing that will stay with you. It is never a stranger, not a con artist, not someone you met last week. It is the person who knows your phone number by heart, the person who has sat at your kitchen table and eaten your food and called you family. That is who I'm talking about. I know, because I was that generous person for 40 years. I gave and I gave and I smiled while I gave, and I told myself it was love. It wasn't. I just didn't know the difference yet. But I do now. And before I leave this earth, I want to make sure you do too. I was born in 1932 in Shamokin, Pennsylvania, a cold town that smelled of dust and hard winters and my mother's lye soap. My father left for the mines before the sun came up every morning. I can still hear his boots on the wooden stairs, that heavy, certain sound at 5 in the morning before any light touched the sky. We had 1 yellow light bulb over the kitchen table. That was where everything happened. Meals, arguments, homework, prayers. My mother was a woman who took in other people's laundry to make ends meet, and she did it without complaint. And she taught me that a good woman pours herself out without measure. I believed her. She was the best woman I ever knew, and she was wrong about that one thing. I married my first husband, Thomas, when I was 19. He was a decent man, and I loved him. And I carried into that marriage everything my mother had taught me. That family means you give without asking. That saying no is the same as saying you don't care. That the measure of a good person is how much they're willing to sacrifice. I believed all of it. The whole town believed it. The church believed it. Nobody told me there was a difference between giving freely and being drained quietly. We just called it love and kept going. And so I poured into Thomas, into his family, into neighbors, into anyone who came to the door with a need and a story. I was good at it. People said so. Eleanor will help. Call Eleanor. I heard my name said that way for years, and I thought it was a compliment. I thought it meant I was loved. What I didn't understand yet, what it took me decades to learn, is that there is a difference between someone calling your name because they treasure you and someone calling your name because they know you won't say no. Those 2 things feel identical at first. Only time and loss teach you how to tell them apart. I didn't know then what I know now, but the signs were already there, written in the small surrenders I made so naturally I barely felt them go. And I want you to understand, before we go any further, that I am not telling you this story to make you distrust everyone you love. I'm telling it because I spent 40 years confusing use for love, and the cost of that confusion nearly broke me. Stay with me. If you're new here, this channel is for people who have lived long enough to have something real to say. We don't traffic in easy answers or things that just feel good to hear. If you want the truth from people who earned it the hard way, subscribe. Hit the notification bell, because every video on this channel is something I wish I had heard at 30, at 40, at 50, when I still had time to change course. You may still have that time. Don't waste it. For the first 40 years of my adult life, I said yes when I should have said no. I want to be specific with you because I think specifics are the only thing that actually reaches people. The first time was in 1961. I was 29 years old. My brother-in-law came to me with a story about a car repair and a missed paycheck and a landlord who wouldn't wait. He needed $320. That was my entire emergency fund. Every dollar I had saved over 2 years of careful, deliberate putting away. He said he'd have it back to me in 30 days. He said, "Eleanor, you're the only one I can trust." I felt the warmth of that. I felt chosen. I opened my checkbook and I wrote that number out and I handed it to him with both hands and he thanked me and he left. 30 days came and went. 60 days. 6 months. I never saw that money again. And I never once asked for it because asking felt unkind. The second thing I gave was time. Great, irretrievable blocks of my own life. Starting in the spring of 1969, when my daughter and her husband and their 2 young children moved into our spare bedroom for what she called, "Just 3 months, Mama, just until we get back on our feet." My husband, Frank, my second husband, the quiet, patient one, he said very little at the time, just looked at me with those steady gray eyes and asked once, gently, "How long is 3 months, Eleanor?" I told him not to be hard-hearted. 3 months became 6. 6 became a year. A year became 3. Every morning I was up making breakfast for 6 people. Every evening I was bathing grandchildren while my daughter rested. And I told myself it was what mothers do. That's when my friend Miriam pulled me aside one afternoon on the front porch and said, low and careful, "Eleanor, she is resting on you, and you are letting her." I thanked Miriam for her concern, went back inside, and started on dinner for 6. Because I was good at this, because I told myself they needed me. And then one morning I woke up and Frank was standing at the window with his coffee, not looking at me. And he said quietly to the glass, "Eleanor, you are disappearing." That was all he said. He didn't turn around. He just set his coffee mug down on the sill and he walked to work. And I stood in my own kitchen in the middle of a house full of people and felt for the first time completely alone. But I didn't stop. I told myself Frank didn't understand. I told myself the children needed stability. I told myself this is what love looks like, messy and exhausting and without end. My daughter's family moved out in the fall of 1972, finally, when her husband found steady work. She hugged me at the door, said, "I don't know what we'd have done without you, Mama," and drove away. She called twice that first year, then once, then Christmas cards. The well had run dry, and she had gone to find another one, and still I didn't learn. In 1974, my nephew Gerald came with paperwork, a small business loan he needed a co-signer for, just a signature, he said. "Just my name on a line. It won't cost you a thing." Frank sat at the table while Gerald explained it, and Frank looked at me, and I looked at the paperwork, and I signed it. 18 months later, Gerald's business folded. The bank came for the debt, and my credit was ruined for 6 years. 6 years of being turned down quietly, of Frank absorbing the embarrassment without complaint, of me carrying the specific shame of having trusted wrong and paying for it in ways that compounded slowly, month after month, like interest on a debt I never meant to take on. And still, I told myself, he needed me. What else was I supposed to do? What I was supposed to do, and what I could not yet bring myself to do, was exactly what Miriam had been telling me for years, and what Frank communicated not in words, but in the growing silence between us. He had stopped trying to caution me. That was the warning I missed most completely. When a patient man stops saying anything at all, it is not because he has made peace with things. It is because he has run out of hope that anything will change. I saw the tiredness in his face, and I called it age. I saw the distance, and I called it his nature. I was 53 years old, and I was losing my marriage one unanswered warning at a time. And I was too busy pouring myself into people who were already walking away to notice the one person who had stayed. It was a Wednesday, March the 3rd, 1987. I was 55 years old. It was 11:15 at night, and Frank was asleep, and I was sitting at the kitchen table with the frost pressing itself flat against the window and a mug of tea gone cold at my elbow that I hadn't touched in an hour. I had the checkbook open in front of me. The green checkbook with the cover worn thin and soft as cloth from years of handling. I was trying to make the numbers work. Gerald's debt had finally cleared, but the years of financial unraveling had left us behind in ways I was only now fully seeing. I added the column 4 times. I got 4 different answers. The 5th time I added it, I got the real one, and I sat very still in the yellow kitchen light and looked at what 40 years of saying yes had actually cost. The frost made no sound. The house made no sound. There was only the faint tick of the clock above the stove and the feeling of the worn checkbook cover under my fingertips. That softness that had once felt like comfort and now felt like evidence. I thought about the $320 in 1961. I thought about Gerald's signature line. I thought about 3 years of cooking for 6 people in my own home while my daughter rested in the spare bedroom. I thought about Miriam on the porch. I thought about Frank's voice saying, "Eleanor, you are disappearing into the cold window glass." And in the quiet of that kitchen, with the frost outside and the clock ticking and the cold tea sitting untouched, I finally let myself understand what I had been refusing to understand for decades. And that's when I understood. Giving does not earn love. I had believed that completely. Believed it the way you believe in gravity, and it was wrong. I had believed that family wouldn't take advantage, that only strangers did that, and that was wrong too. And the hardest truth, the one I sat with longest that night. The people who had taken the most from me had never once looked uncomfortable asking. Not once. They had asked the way you ask someone to pass the salt, easily, naturally, as though it had never occurred to them that I might need what they were asking for. I had given away $11,000 over the years. I had given away 6 years of credit. I had given away my job at the fabric shop, a job I had loved, to care for a cousin who recovered fully and never mentioned it again. I had given away 3 years of my marriage to house a daughter who now sent Christmas cards. And the thing I could never recover, the thing that had no dollar amount, the quiet certainty that I was worth something beyond what I was willing to hand over. I was 55 years old, sitting alone at my kitchen table at 11:15 at night, and I thought, there is nothing left in me that belongs to me. I thought about simply closing the checkbook and going to bed and getting up the next morning and starting the whole cycle again, because I didn't know how to do anything else. That was the lowest I have ever been. Not dramatic, not loud. Just a woman at a table in a quiet house, finally out of things to give, wondering if anyone would notice. I don't know how long I sat there. Long enough that the clock moved past midnight. And then I heard the creak of the floorboards in the hallway, and Frank came in wearing his old robe, hair uneven from the pillow, reaching past me for a glass of water. He saw my face. He didn't ask a single question. He just pulled out the chair beside me and sat down and put his hand over mine, that large, warm, certain hand. And he didn't say a word. And I looked at his hand on mine and I thought, This man has never once asked me for something I wasn't ready to give. In 31 years, not once. He had only ever asked for my presence, and I had been somewhere else for most of it. That was the moment. Not because I was angry, not because I had finally run the numbers correctly, because I was sitting in the only warmth that had ever been unconditional, and I had almost let it go quiet while I was busy filling other people's buckets. The first thing I changed was the smallest and the hardest. The very next time someone called with a need, it was my nephew Gerald again, remarkably with a new story. I said 4 words I had never said before in that combination. I need to think. He paused. You could hear the surprise in the pause, that brief recalibration. He said, of course, take your time. I took 24 hours. I thought about whether he had any other options or whether I was simply the easiest one. I thought about what saying yes would cost me and whether I had it to spend. The next day, I called him back and I said no. I wasn't able to help this time. He said he understood. He didn't call again for 2 years. And when he did call, it was with another request. That told me everything the no had needed to tell me. The second change was a question. One question I began asking myself before every request, every favor, every Eleanor, could you just... And that question was this. Is this person asking me because I am genuinely their only option or because I am their most comfortable one? That question changed everything. Because most of the time, not all of the time, but most, the answer was the second one. I was convenient. I was reliable. I was the well that had never said no. So why would they go looking for water anywhere else? I started asking the question and sitting with the answer. And slowly, over months, I began to see the pattern that had been there the whole time. And the resistance came fast and loud and personal. My daughter called it coldness. My brother-in-law stopped calling entirely, which I had braced for, but still felt like a small death when it happened. A woman from church told someone who eventually told me that Eleanor Marsh had gotten hard in her old age. Hard. I turned that word over for a long time. And then one evening, Frank looked up from his newspaper and said, without me having mentioned any of it, "You're not hard, Eleanor. You're just finally solid." I held on to that. On the mornings when the guilt rose up like water, and it did every morning for 6 months without fail, I said that word to myself. Solid, not hard, solid. There is a difference, and learning to feel that difference was the whole of the work. I kept at it through 1987, through 1988, through the slow, uncomfortable process of people adjusting to a version of me that had limits. Some adjusted, some didn't. The ones who didn't, who pulled back, who grew cold, who suddenly had less time for me once I had less to give, they answered a question I hadn't known I was asking. And the ones who stayed, who didn't flinch at my no, who called on a Tuesday for no reason other than to hear my voice. Those people became the whole of my world, a smaller world, a real one. By 1990, 3 years in, I had saved $4,000, the first real savings I'd had since my 30s. Frank and I took a train to Washington that spring and walked around the monuments and ate lunch outside and held hands like we were young again. I thought, I nearly traded this for a cousin who never called. And now, 38 years later, I want to tell you what all of it taught me. Not the polished version, the true one. Here is what 93 years taught me. Love and use are dressed in the same clothes, and the only way to tell them apart is to watch how someone responds to your no. That is the whole test. You don't need to analyze the relationship for years. You don't need to keep score or build a case. You say no, gently, without apology once, and you watch. Someone who loves you will feel uncomfortable having asked at all. They will say, "Of course, don't worry about it," and they will mean it, and they will not bring it up again, and they will not treat you differently the following week. Someone using you will feel something else: confusion, irritation, a subtle withdrawal of warmth. Because your no has disrupted something they were counting on, and you were not supposed to disrupt it. You were supposed to be the well that never runs dry. Everyone says you should give generously without keeping score, especially to family. I was told this my entire life. Society puts it in every story, every sermon, every mother's lesson at the kitchen table. And I want to be careful here, because I am not saying that generosity is wrong. It is one of the finest things a human being can do. But here is the truth that took me 4 decades to learn. Unconditional generosity given to conditional people does not produce love. It produces expectation. And expectation, left long enough, produces entitlement. I watched it happen in my own life. And I watched it happen to my friend Ruth, who signed her house over to her son to help him get started and died in a nursing home while he remodeled the kitchen. I watched it happen to Harriet, who lent her retirement savings to her daughter 3 times. The 4th time Harriet had nothing left to lend, the daughter stopped returning calls. These were not monsters. They were people who had been trained by Ruth's and Harriet's own endless yeses to expect the well to always be full. The third thing 93 years taught me is this: the people who are using you know it. On some level, maybe not a conscious one, maybe buried under their own stories about need and family and deserving, they know. And you are the only one in the exchange who doesn't. You are the only one who is surprised when it ends. They are not surprised. They have already located the next well. I know that is hard to hear. I know it may make you think of a specific face right now, someone you have given to, and the thought that they knew, that they were comfortable with it, may feel like a wound. I'm sorry for that, but I would rather give you a wound that heals than a comfort that doesn't. I want to be clear about what I am not saying. I am not saying never help the people you love. I am not saying assume the worst about every request. I am not saying close yourself off and count every dollar and keep a ledger of favors. What I am saying is, watch how someone asks. Watch whether they ask at all, or whether they simply arrive with an expectation already formed and your agreement already assumed. Watch whether they have considered what it costs you. Watch whether the thought of your sacrifice makes them hesitate. Hesitation is love. Comfort is something else. Here is the simplest way I know to say it. Love is a well. You can draw from it. That's what a well is for. That's its whole purpose. And there is joy in being drawn from by the right people. But if one person comes every single day with a bucket while everyone else only cups their hands, the well runs dry. And when it does, that person will not mourn the well. They will simply go looking for another one. They were never there for you. They were there for the water. Don't let someone empty the well of your years. You only have the one. Now, about you. You are watching this because something in you already knows. You have felt it, that particular tiredness that comes not from working hard, but from being quietly drained. You know the feeling of hanging up the phone and sitting for a moment in a heaviness you can't quite name. You probably say yes before the person has even finished the sentence. You tell yourself you're just being kind, just being a good friend, a good child, a good parent. You tell yourself they would do the same for you. I told myself all of those things for 40 years, and not one of them was a good enough reason to keep going. If you recognize yourself in this, I need you to stay with me for the next few minutes, because what I'm about to tell you is the thing I wish someone had sat me down and said when I was 30 years old. The two things I mentioned at the beginning, here they are, plainly. The first is your peace. When someone repeatedly asks you to absorb their chaos, their financial crises, their emergencies that come every few months like clockwork, their instability that somehow always lands on your doorstep, that is not a person who needs you. That is a person who is managing you. They have learned that your peace is available to them, that you will trade your stillness for their storm, and they have come to count on that trade. The second thing is your future security. When someone asks you for money, for a signature, for resources that represent your safety net, especially more than once, especially while framing it as an act of love or trust or family loyalty, you must pay attention to that framing. Love does not borrow against your future to fund someone else's present. Love does not put you at risk and call it connection. I know what you're thinking right now. You're thinking, but they really do need help. And I want to acknowledge that sometimes, yes, the need is real. But here is how you know. A person with a real need will accept your no and find another way. They will not punish you for protecting yourself. They will not grow cold or distant or suddenly too busy for you. If they do any of those things after a no, the no has just given you the most important information you could have. You didn't lose someone who loved you. You discovered someone who loved what you provided. And I know you're thinking, but they are family. Yes, and family is not a debt with no ceiling. Family is a relationship that both people maintain. You are not required to fund, rescue, absorb, or carry someone indefinitely simply because you share a name. You do not need a reason eloquent enough to justify protecting yourself. You do not need to have a perfect argument prepared before you're allowed to say no. You are not cruel for having limits. You are not selfish for keeping something back for yourself and your future and the people who have shown up for you without an agenda. You are allowed to say, not this time. You are allowed to let the silence sit after you say it. You are allowed to let them find another way. The people who love you will understand. The people who don't understand are telling you something. I'm 93 years old. I don't have much time left. I know that, and I have made my peace with it. But I want you to hear me say this. One old woman to whoever is on the other side of this screen. Neither do you. Not in the way you think. You feel young, you feel like there is still a great deal of time to fix things and reclaim things and get around to things. I thought that at 40. I thought it at 50. At 55, I was sitting at a kitchen table at midnight with a worn green checkbook and a cold cup of tea and the sudden terrible understanding that years had gone somewhere I hadn't intended to send them. Don't let that be you. There is no later. Later is the word I used every time I chose someone else's need over my own life. Later I'll rest. Later I'll save. Later Frank and I will take that trip. Frank died in 2009. There is no later anymore. Don't let someone drain the well of your years, because when the well is dry, you cannot fill it back up. You cannot go back to 1969 and not sign the cosigner line. You cannot go back to the spare bedroom years. The time goes and it does not return. If your parents are still alive, go see them. Not because they need something from you, because one day, and the day will come before you have prepared yourself for it, your phone will ring and the voice on the other end will say words that rearrange everything. And after that call, you will give anything, absolutely anything, to sit with them one more time at their kitchen table and have nowhere else to be. And think about your children. Think about the ordinary Tuesday evening you keep postponing because someone else needs something. There will come a day when they stop asking for you the way they ask for you now, not out of anger, simply because they grew, and growing took them somewhere else. And the window for certain kinds of closeness doesn't stay open forever. Don't be 70 years old wishing you had protected your evenings at 40. Don't be 80 staring at a checkbook, doing the math on what the yeses actually cost. I'm telling you this because I am old enough to have nothing left to gain from softening it. I just want you to have the life that I took too long to claim for myself. Remember, I said at the very beginning, it's never a stranger. It's the person at your kitchen table. Now you know what to watch for. Not the face, the pattern, the ease with which they ask, the absence of hesitation, the way the warmth fluctuates depending on what you've given lately. That is the thing. That is the whole of it. The people who love you will be uncomfortable asking you to sacrifice. The people using you will be perfectly comfortable with it. Sit with that. Let it show you what you already, somewhere, know. I am 93 years old. I have 4 children, 11 grandchildren, and 3 great-grandchildren. The ones who are close, the ones who call on a Tuesday with no agenda, who come at Christmas because they want to and not because they want something, who have heard my no and loved me anyway. Not one of them has ever made me feel guilty for protecting myself. Not once. That is how I know. That is how you'll know too. If something in this video landed somewhere true for you, I want you to tell me. Leave a comment. You don't have to name anyone. Just tell me. Do you know who I'm talking about? Because I think you do. If this reached you, pass it to someone who needs it. And if you want more of this, honest words from people who earned them the long way, subscribe. We are building something real here, and there is room for you in it. I'm 93 years old. I make my tea every morning in the same blue pot I bought in 1959, the year Frank and I moved into our first real house. I have learned that every year of your life is a thing you spend, and you only carry so many. Spend them on people who are uncomfortable taking from you. Spend them on the ones who stay after the well runs dry. God bless you. Go protect your peace. Go live.